Yeah, President Trump is once again vowing new tariffs, this time saying he'll double tariffs on imported steel from 25 to 50%. The president says they'll kick into...
Canada won't bow down to a bully. And we won't stand by as tariffs hurt our workers and their families. Trump wants us to lose our cool and to cave in.
In a forceful and robust demonstration of its economic sovereignty, Canada is fully prepared and poised to enact a formidable series of strategic countermeasures against the United States. Welcome viewers to my channel. If you're new here, please subscribe, like my video, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next update. This retaliatory action...
America is not Canada. And Canada never, ever will be part of America in any way, shape, or form.
Now to President Trump promising to double tariffs on foreign steel and announcing a major deal with Japan as Elon Musk officially leaves his role at the White House. ABC
is contingent upon the failure of a new, mutually beneficial trade agreement to be established and fully finalized by the critical deadline of July 21st. Prime Minister Mark Carney articulated this firm ultimatum during a meticulously orchestrated news conference, a public address directly and unequivocally addressing the significant negative economic pressure that has been inflicted upon the Canadian economy by the existing and, in his view, unjust 50% tariff that the United States has unilaterally levied on Canadian steel and aluminum products. Carney's detailed and multifaceted plan is strategically aimed at not only providing immediate and effective protection to Canada's vital domestic steel and aluminum industries, but also at comprehensively reinforcing the nation's broader economic resilience and fortitude in the face of what he has repeatedly and publicly described as unfair and discriminatory U.S. trade actions. The tension is palpable, as a decades-long relationship built on close economic ties now hangs in the balance, threatened by protectionist policies from its closest neighbor. The central pillar and cornerstone of Canada's planned response is the sophisticated implementation of a new tariff rate quota system. This is a highly advanced and carefully calibrated trade tool, specifically designed to regulate and restrict the total volume of goods entering the country. Under this proposed system, a specific and limited amount of steel and aluminum from trade partner countries, including the United States, will be permitted to be imported without any additional duties or financial penalties. This initial quota allows for a predictable flow of trade, providing a semblance of stability. However, any quantity of these goods that exceeds this predefined and carefully calibrated quota would be subjected to a severe and financially crippling tariff. The strategic logic underpinning this approach is both simple and profoundly powerful. By making U.S. imports significantly more expensive and less competitive, Canada intends to make its own domestically produced steel and aluminum far more attractive and cost-effective for local businesses. This would serve to effectively shield Canadian manufacturers from the market distortion and unfair competition caused by the U.S. Tariffs, while simultaneously encouraging a greater reliance on and strengthening of national supply chains. It's a classic chess move in international trade, designed to create a protected economic moat around Canada's most vulnerable industries, redirecting internal demand toward domestic production and away from foreign, tariff-burdened sources. Speaking from the heart of Parliament Hill, Prime Minister Carney's message was one of unwavering determination and resolute resolve. He underscored the absolute necessity of these measures, stating that they are essential to reinforce our strength at home and safeguard Canadian workers and businesses. The Prime Minister also took care to emphasize that the Canadian government's retaliatory tariffs are not a fixed or immutable policy. Rather, they are designed to be flexible and in flux, with the explicit possibility that they could be adjusted, either increased or decreased, based on the tangible progress and successful outcomes of the ongoing trade negotiations. This strategic flexibility suggests that while Canada is serious about finding a diplomatic and negotiated solution to the trade dispute, it is also fully prepared to escalate its response if talks stall, falter, or fail to produce a favorable result. The impending and highly publicized deadline of July 21st stems from a temporary agreement reached between Prime Minister Carney and U.S. President Donald Trump during the recent G7 summit, a meeting where both leaders committed to a 30-day window to engage in productive negotiations and hopefully reach a final resolution. This short timeline adds a sense of urgency and pressure, making every day of the negotiation period critical for the future of North American trade. To further bolster Canada's economic position and proactively stimulate domestic demand for its industrial output, the government has introduced a landmark piece of legislation, Bill C-5, which has been colloquially dubbed the One Canadian Economy Act. This proposed legislation, if it is successfully passed into law, would grant the Canadian government the unprecedented authority to fast-track and accelerate large-scale nation-building projects that inherently require immense and continuous quantities of steel and aluminum. These projects could encompass a wide range of critical infrastructure, from the development of a national electricity grid that links the entire country to the construction of entirely new mass transit lines. The legislation would serve a dual and interconnected purpose. It would provide a massive stimulus to Canada's steel industry and reduce its reliance on foreign imports while simultaneously advancing critical national infrastructure goals. In a stirring and emotionally resonant speech, Carney underscored the fundamental self-sufficiency and inherent strength of the Canadian economy, confidently telling reporters, "We, as Canadians, can give ourselves far more than the Americans can ever take away." He framed the nation's dedicated steel and aluminum workers as being on the front lines of this trade war, passionately asserting that their vital contributions are absolutely essential to building what he proudly called the strongest economy in the G7. This rhetoric frames the economic dispute not just as a policy disagreement, but as a national effort, rallying citizens behind the government's decisive actions. U.S. Steel Canada's rejection of ESSA Global's bid, a protracted saga of financial due diligence and restructuring. In a separate but equally significant and highly consequential development for Canada's complex industrial landscape, U.S. Steel Canada Inc. has for the second time emphatically rejected a new acquisition offer from the ESSA Global Fund. This decisive move shines a spotlight on the company's intricate and prolonged restructuring process, which has been subject to immense scrutiny. The company, which was previously known as the iconic Canadian steelmaker Stelco, has been operating under the legal protection of the Companies Creditors Arrangement Act, CCA, since September 2014, making this a long-running, highly scrutinized, and court-supervised effort to secure a viable and financially sound new owner. The rejection highlights the deep-seated mistrust and concerns that have plagued the process, leaving thousands of jobs and pension benefits in a state of precarious uncertainty. U.S. Steel Canada's rationale for its latest rejection of the ESSA Global offer was delivered with both clarity and decisive finality. The company pointed out that ESSA Global had been previously and unequivocally disqualified as a potential bidder. The core reason for that earlier elimination was ESSA's demonstrable inability to provide sufficient and credible evidence proving its financial wherewithal, which is the necessary capital to not only acquire the company, but also to ensure its long-term operational success and solvency. This previous failure had raised serious and deeply entrenched concerns among key stakeholders about the fund's actual capacity to manage such a significant and financially burdened enterprise. ESSA's repeated attempts, despite this history, have been viewed by some as an attempt to bypass the proper and rigorous due diligence process that has been carefully established under the CCA. The recent offer, which was submitted by a new group created by ESSA Global called Ontario Steel Investments, was quickly and definitively dismissed by U.S. Steel Canada as being substantially similar to the one that had already been rejected. While the new offer did not publicly disclose a specific or final purchase price, it did make an earnest attempt to address one of the most significant and pressing challenges facing the company, its enormous and long-standing pension liabilities. Specifically, Ontario Steel Investments proposed to take on a staggering $954 million of the company's employer liabilities under its pension plans. Additionally, It committed to an annual contribution of $25 million toward post-retirement benefits for both the company's current and retired employees. This strategic financial commitment was likely a calculated attempt to win over crucial stakeholders, particularly the